All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the MicroDesk webinar series. My name is Megan Fulligar. I'm the marketing manager here at MicroDesk. Welcome to today's webinar, Construction Pre-Bid Technology Solutions. All right. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, MicroDesk is an Autodesk Gold, Oracle, and Google partner. We provide technology training and consulting solutions for the AEC industry. We have 12 offices located throughout the East and West Coast with a staff of over 90 consulting and technical specialists. The best way to leverage today's technologies in the construction industry is to utilize BIM from the start of the construction process. In this 30-minute webinar, we'll give an overview of how BIM can be applied during the pre-bid stage in construction. Learn about strategies for leveraging Revit and Navisworks to more effectively review and analyze building models and present building sequencing and construction phasing. Presenting today's session, we have with us MicroDesk Senior Consultant, Peter Marchese. Peter joins MicroDesk as a senior consultant with expertise in architectural technology solutions. He has extensive working knowledge of AutoCAD, Architectural Desktop, and Revit. At MicroDesk, Peter works with national architecture firms implementing Revit. He specializes in custom training and content creation and leading firms through the process of creating standards and workflows based on building information modeling technology. Just a few logistics before we begin. In order to minimize any background distractions, you are all on mute for the duration of the session. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them to the question area of the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen. Peter will address as many questions as he can at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time, we will provide you with our contact information so you can follow up with us. And I will hand it over to Peter.
Thank you very much, Megan. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We appreciate your time. So what we're going to be looking at is a little bit of the project lifecycle. So everybody at this point starts to realize that you can use BIM for the entire process. The thing is, how you use BIM and what it is that you're trying to achieve is actually going to be a little bit different depending on what phase or what portion of this process you're in. What we're going to be looking at today is essentially this portion of the pie. So we've got our documentation model, and how do we carry that through our construction? So we actually have a special class that goes through this process, which is more from the standpoint of the construction firm or how to manage the content as it goes through, whether it's being used for content for the owner at the end or for actually dealing with the construction process. Now, one of the things that is key to understand for this is the actual level of detail or level of design. Now, you have AAE 202, which is sort of like the protocol for these levels. So if you ever hear somebody saying, well, we're doing a model and it's 200 level of detail, this is essentially what this means. Now, this is sort of broad strokes. It's not likely that you're going to have every single thing in an entire model all be the exact same level of detail. So your mechanical systems might be to 300, but the structure might be to 200. And the architecture might vary from 100 to 300 depending on what portions of the building you're working on or what portions of the building are very important or detailed. And some of this might be informed also with, are you doing renderings and walkthroughs? So you might actually model certain things to a higher level of detail because it needs to look a certain way, not necessarily because of a construction benefit. So you'll be seeing a lot of things like this. Now, in terms of what benefits BIM has for the industry, the main one that everybody seems to be saying is their main benefit that they're getting out of this is visualization. And then below, that's marketing. So the benefit is taking your design and making them real from a standpoint of being able to show your design, whether it's selling a design or explaining it. Now, the second one down there is clash detection, and that's probably the biggest one from this portion. The problem is, if you look here and down the bottom, you've got construction monitoring, phasing, record models, cost estimating, shop drawing coordination. All of those are not anywhere near as utilized. Now, they're also further down the line. So what we're looking at doing is taking something that is, in all honesty, the biggest return on investment of BIM, but not everybody is actually taking advantage of it. So the work that we're looking to go over now is focused specifically on that portion. So the idea of making it real in the computer before it's real in the real world. You know, if you find a problem in the computer, you can always delete it or move it. If there's a problem in the real world, yeah, maybe you can just fix the problem. But the problem is maybe you have to order something new. That adds time. By the time the parts that come in that you need, great, the people to install that might not be available. So one little mistake could sideline a whole project. So going through everything in the computer virtually for clash deduction, for cost estimating, for actually project sequencing, those things are all very important. And also, even though they might add a little bit of time to your project or to the process, that's information and money that is well spent because it's going to pay dividends down the line. Now, I'm going to hop out of this and go to the actual software. So let's see here. There we go. So right now, I'm in Revit 2013. Now, one of the nice benefits of this is that it's Revit, not Revit Arc, not Revit MEP, not Revit Structure, just Revit. Because I'm on the Building Design Suite, I have the tools for all three. Now, some of the benefits of this is that if I work for a construction firm, what kind of model can I expect to get from an architect or an engineer? Or can I even expect to get that model? Now, if I'm drawing a wall in an architectural project, let's say it's brick on metal stud, I'll just draw this wall there, zoom in on it. It's going to look really simple, but I can always change the level of detail and actually see more information. Now, this is fine for construction documentation. The thing is, though, for actual construction sequencing, I might need a lot more information in this. I might need to modify certain things. There's actually tools built inside of Revit that have been there for a couple of releases now that are geared just towards that. If I click on this wall, what I can actually do is break this up into its component parts, meaning that I can now actually choose these individual pieces. So if I want to actually modify things here, I can change the actual layers of that wall's construction. I can say I want to phase different parts of this wall. So if I really want to have a full 4D model of every little piece of this, I can actually come in here and sequence and say that rather than just being phase created and demoed, I want this to actually just be new and existing. I can say, okay, during this phase, we're putting up the studs. And then I'm going to come in and put the jip up later, sheathing. So I can actually individually pick each layer of that wall to get down to the very details of this. So a lot more information that I can modify, and it's still within the native Revit program. Then I can always pick an existing object and add that data to this. I don't have to start off from scratch having it built that specific way. Another thing, let's say you have a really big floor. So come in here, actually create my floor boundary. Okay, come on. And of course my floor doesn't want to work today. Okay. What I can end up doing with this is actually modifying this to be the kind of floor that I want this to actually be. So I can actually split that object up using the parts command, just like I'd be able to split that up just like this wall. So that enables me to take what I might have received from the architect as one huge floor. It's not going to be poured that way. I can actually split that up into the individual pieces so that it'll actually behave and be scheduled or quantified in the way that it actually would be laid out in the field. So these things that I'm doing here, I actually have that individual control. I can modify these to be what I want them to actually be. So I can actually pick on the different layers, show them as higher or lower. If I need to show a brick shelf but the initial design didn't have it, I can easily just come down there and I'll move the brick shelf down. So I can actually schedule, quantify, and get all the information that I feel I need from my model. Now, for other things, let's say I have a structural column. And I want to say this one is concrete. That's going up. Now, normally that might be all you need to do. Is just show that column, and you're all set. Start that 0. There we go. Now, what happens if what I really want to do and show here, though, is I'd like to actually see this column with the rebar inside of it. So if I'm running piping through this column, I'm actually running things near it, or I want to actually see how much space do I have around it. So if I have that view from the PowerPoint before, if you have a situation like this, where there's a lot of rebar going on, there's a lot of things happening within a very tight space. Maybe what's happening is they're running conduit through it. Maybe what's happening is I actually have to figure out how am I going to get all that together. What I can end up doing is modeling all of that rebar. Maybe not for the entire model, maybe again only for key locations where I have to work. And with the tools, it's actually quite easy. I can just select that, tell it that I want to put reinforcing in it. What this will end up doing is it'll give me an actual, window with all my connections inside. So let me do this. Start off with my structural template instead. That'll give me that. All right. So this will give me the tools where I can just select the object, fill in the blanks essentially, and this will actually lay out all of my rebar for me. So if I understand where my bars need to be, which size they should actually be, do I want to have hooks at the top, what should the stirrups look like, how they're going to be distributed. So maybe I want them to be a little bit heavier on the bottom. And should they maybe have dowels at the top or the bottom? What should this look like? So basically I'm just going through there, telling it that I want them. And now in that location, whichever pieces I've selected, I'll actually have all my rebar made. And I can do this for more than just columns at a time. I can actually set things up so this will be automatic for much of my model. There we go. So you can feel my rebar right in there. Now this is something that I can use inside of Revit, but I can also take this to the next step, which would be Navisworks. So if I needed to do clash detection between multiple models, or to see really how much space do I have in here, or if I have multiple models coming together, is there actually enough space for things to fit without actually causing issues? Now, this is relatively simple. That wall that I did before, again, still relatively simple. For other projects, and when you have a lot of things coming together in a very tight space, and maybe you started the project off with nothing more than the big CAD file, but maybe the project is fast-tracked, and you really need to know exactly what's happening. Well, what can be done is only in the specific locations that are important, we can actually run through and modify and model what's needed. So in this case, what we have is an MRI room with just about every single thing modeled at a very high level of detail. Existing content to be demoed, all the actual structural pieces to a much higher level of detail than you would typically see for construction documentation. But in the case of this project, was very necessary to ensure that every little thing would fit in a very tight space. So we knew all of the information on what the structure would look like, where it would go. And in some cases, you can see where there are issues with things like piping and conduit going into the ductwork where it had been. But by modeling everything here at a very high level of detail and being able to see and coordinate things based on the kinds of systems that they are, this can easily be taken to the next level, which would be our clash detection and more of the construction modeling. So in this case, all this information here is going to be readily leaned on and utilized. So I would take this and bring that to Navisworks. Now, Navisworks, you do not actually model anything. You bring in the models from elsewhere, but they can be from just about any place. It doesn't have to be AutoCAD, Revit, SketchUp. It can be anything. But I can bring this in here. And as you can see now in the newer releases, I can actually see my structural grids, so I know where it is that I'm actually looking within the model space. And I can set this up to actually show me all my systems. So right now I'm actually highlighting my architectural by making that transparent. I'm showing all my ductwork as sort of a cyan. My electric is green, all my conduit there. And then I have all my piping is set up as an orange. Now, at the moment, that's really just showing everything very simplistically. But the benefit of using a BIM tool, not just a solid modeler, but something that has some intelligence to it, is that rather than just grabbing the whole thing and making it certain colors, I can actually set this up to search my model. So what I just basically did was click on something called a search set in Navisworks. What that allows me to do is actually go in and tell it, I want you to look through every object in this model and select the objects that have a certain kind of data. In this case, it's grabbing anything that is a mechanical piece that is part of a system called return. Just as if I click on the other one, that grabs all the ones on supply. So in this case, I can very quickly grab and select just about anything in here with one click. And the benefit of that being a search is that, this is probably going to be a live project. As the project goes on, these files that I have here, they're going to be continually updated. It's not like it's a one-shot deal and that's what's going to happen. Especially if you have problems that you find, you'll want to fix them. I can bring those back in after being taking adjustments. And this will automatically go and get all of the current things that match that content. It's not looking at what I used to select. It's looking at what still matches that information, that data. Now, that kind of data is very useful inside of Navisworks because the main thing that most people utilize, again, if we look back at that little survey, is going to be the clash. There we go. Now, in this case, I just did a really quick one that was looking at all my ductwork versus all my electric, so all the conduit that I have in there. And this turns up 67 clashes. So from there, I can look at my results, and I can actually click on these, and it'll show me all the issues that I have and where they all occur. Some of these clashes might be consistent with several different things. So I might have one pipe that hits 10 or 12 objects. I can tell this to sort them by their proximity to certain things. But I can also start assigning these. What that means is that if I'm using this from a standpoint of project management, I can say, okay, there's a problem here. It's a couple of feet off of the C8 grid line, and you are going to deal with it. So I can start to give this out and actually tell whose responsibility it is to fix this. I can keep track of the status of this, and these can automatically be listed as resolved when I rerun this and it finds out that that clash no longer is occurring. I can modify what kind of a clash this is, whether it's a hard, it has to physically interact, or soft, I'm giving it a little bit of clearance. So I can start to modify a lot of things inside of this. And it really just depends on how I want to manage this. What data do I actually want to see? There's a lot of things here that I can actually look at. Now, if what I'm doing is I'm running this clash and I'm going to be sending this to someone else, I'm not actually looking at it with somebody next to me, I can always create a report, save this out, and then send it to somebody else. And any of the settings that I've made in here or any customizations I've done, I can always save that right up top. So when I decide I want to do another one, I'll say add a test. And this one's looking at ductwork versus pipe. So I actually have two different clashes that I can keep going back and forth between. It remembers the settings, it remembers the results, and I can actually track how many clashes I have. If after the first project status meeting we have, we run through and we take care of about 30 of these. I'll still see I have 37 that are active. I reviewed and approved or resolved however many else that are still floating around. and this becomes part of the project record. It'll remember when I found this, and then it'll also remember when it was fixed. Again, this is one of the typical ones. And if it's something that you run all the time, or you need to give the data to somebody else, I can export this and share that with others. Now, branching off of this, right now I'm in Navisworks, and I'm doing my clash test. I'm looking at all these different models that I'm coming together. But Navisworks is a program that has to run on a computer. That might seem kind of dumb to say that, but what I mean is it needs to run where you physically are, on an actual computer. You're not going to be running it on like your iPod or anything like that. There's a program called BIM 360 Glue. So if you remember a program that used to be called Horizontal Glue, Autodesk purchased it. This allows me to take what I have and actually upload that to the cloud. So at that point, anyone with a web browser can actually log on and review this model with me. They can actually do clashes in the cloud as well. So I'm not just set to having to have a good laptop or a desktop to run this now. If someone's out in the field, little beat-up old laptop, they can connect to the internet, they got a web browser, and they can actually see this information and review it on site. So if you've got subs in a trailer, you're trying to show them what's going on in 3D to make everybody really understand what's happening. Probably don't have a computer that can run a full project Revit model on. Not a problem. The Navisworks files are coordinated and consolidated, but also very light. So I can actually look through this when I'm trying to work through problems on the site. Now, everything I've gone through so far has been focused mostly on the actual putting together the model and then actually looking at problems. How do I deal with and fix those problems? One of the other features that we're looking at is Timeliner. What this essentially does is take my model and start showing it in a 4D simulation, essentially meaning that I get to watch or show my model being put together throughout the project timeline. Not necessarily from, this is the old and then the new, but actually in a week-to-week following the project schedule. This allows me to pull in timelines from places like Microsoft Project, Primavera, and also a CSV file. So if you just like to use Excel and you've got everything laid out in there, not a problem. Bring it in, use it, and that'll actually set things up. If I don't actually have anything like that, I can still add my tasks manually, and I can also say I want to add certain tasks automatically for every layer, every set. So that can actually run through and grab half my model right there. So what this allows me to do is actually show my project being put together piecemeal, one step at a time. So if I want to actually look at the sequencing and make sure that, okay, so you're saying at this point we're going to be bringing in the crane, and then when you start to look at the animation, you realize, well, where are we going to put the crane because we still have all this material there. So you can utilize this not from a clashing standpoint of, is this beam going to hit that duct, which you can also do as well. But you can also use this as a sequencing of where things are on your site. As an example of this is actually a real project. And you can see the timeline going by on the bottom. So what's happening is it's actually going through. You saw first they were putting in the footings, and they poured the actual slab. Now they're going in and showing you in green that's what's happening at that point in time. Once it's finished, then it becomes a solid color. So this is moving a little fast just because I didn't think you wanted to sit here for 3 minutes and watch it at the normal speed. But essentially, this is used on site to keep track of where things should or should not be. Within Navisworks, I can tell it that I want to see the actual timeline versus the planned. So if things are taking longer or actually ahead of schedule, I can actually see how things are doing based on that right there. So there's a lot of little things that I can do within this. I can modify my schedule, I can manage that schedule, and I can set things up to be how I need. So you can see here I got my little timeline that this did automatically. And then I can modify my settings, configure this to look specifically. So again, early, late, just beginning and ending. I can set all this stuff up. And then it just builds based on what it sees and what I've told it to do. And if I need to actually change my timing, I only want to focus on a certain portion. If there's certain text that I want to overlay on this for my client or my presentation, again, it's all editable. This is information that I can customize to meet my needs. So let me hop back in here for a second. Now, a couple of reasons why we do this. Hopefully, this stuff has never happened on any of your projects, but more than likely, you've seen things like this out in the real world. So things that could have easily been dealt with if there was better communication or better coordination. You know, just a couple of clash detections between a few things, you probably wouldn't have to worry about that. Or just seeing that something's wrong in the field and making sure you mention it. But as long as things are being built where the documents say they should be, and that's what caused these problems, these things should have been picked up before it ever got there. And by doing certain kinds of reviews via the web with certain tools or live, these kind of things can be avoided. So I've been keeping an eye on the questions. I haven't seen anything come in there yet.
All right, so yes, if anyone has any questions about any of this, feel free to type it down there in the question bar. All right. Well, it looks like we do have just a couple. Peter, do you use special programs for this process?
No, not.
Or do you have? Do you have to use special programs?
No, a lot of things, like anything else, you're going to get out of something what you put into it. So if you're using SketchUp, you'll be able to take advantage of things for like physical clashing. You're not necessarily going to be getting a whole lot more data out of that, but you can still take advantage of that. So on a lot of projects, you might have things where the architect is using specialized software. Maybe the construction manager is as well. But a lot of the subcontractors maybe don't have access to that or aren't. So at that point, what some places are doing is they're allowing the subs to do the work however they feel they need to, and then having either a third party or the construction firm, the construction management firm might take ownership of this. They'll take all the drawings back from the subs and then model that to keep that up to date with the overall. So that way at the end of the project, you essentially have an as-built.
Okay. And then in that case, who owns the model?
Mm-hmm. That usually comes down to the documentation, not the documentation, but the paperwork from the very beginning of the project. A lot of the times the architect might say, I'm not going to give you my model unless you pay extra or anything like that. Those kind of things could be dealt with early on to make sure that everybody's on the same page with deliverables. But the end result of this is usually the owner will end up receiving the model.
All right, let's see.
One question regarding the service. The service used to be called horizontal glue. What it's called now is BIM 360 glue. So Autodesk has sort of like the 360 moniker for all of their cloud services. So you've got 360 rendering, 360 structural analysis, environmental analysis. The BIM 360 holds to two different programs. One of them was horizontal glue. That's the one I mentioned. And that one is now just 360 glue. The other one is BIM 360 Field, which used to be Vela Field Systems. So both of those are cloud-based. And just to clarify, the question said allows you to view Navisworks files from another computer. In actuality, it doesn't have to be Navis. If I look over here on Revit, you notice that I have a glue button there as well. So essentially, I could upload from Revit, I can upload from AutoCAD, I can upload from Navisworks. So, but it's a cloud-based service that allows you to review and coordinate with that tool. And that'll actually be a subject on one of our future webinars as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Peter, and thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. We hope you found this helpful and educational. If you have any other questions or would like to learn more about any of our pre-bid technology solutions and how to get started, you can visit us at www.microdesk.com, or you can just give us a call. Again, thank you guys for joining us. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.